Good morning, everyone. My name is Kwame Wino from the Institute of Economic Affairs, and I welcome you to our 8th webinar of the year 2022. This webinar is held together with our partners, the Kenya Association of Manufacturers. And so I'll just provide, as the title states, we're discussing the Manufacturing Manifesto. The Kenya Association of Manufacturing has a tradition of preparing an agenda for discussion with the various political coalitions or administrations that are seeking public office. And what they do is to focus on what the state of play is and highlight a couple of things that I think are priorities for any administration to focus on. That one leads to shared growth, but at the same time creates opportunities for manufacturing expansion, given the significance of manufacturing to Kenya's transition, economic transition and structural transformation. So for I think about 6 months last year and part of this year, the Kenya Association of Manufacturers put together a team to highlight, or rather to isolate trends and to present a picture which they hope to put together in a document, which I'm glad to share with you. It's available on the Kenya Association of Manufacturing's website. It was launched on the 25th of last month of February, and it's the function. I mean, it's the reason so we are all here together. And so, just to pass on to for a background to Job Wanjohi, who's representing the Chief Executive of the Kenya Association of Manufacturers. Job, please give us a background to the Manufacturing Manifesto, and then I'll invite the Chair of the Kenya Association of Manufacturers to present highlights from the manifesto.
Good morning, everybody, and thanks, CEO Kwame Owino, for this opportunity for Kenya Association of Manufacturers to present the Manufacturing Manifesto 2022 to 2027. As you have rightly noted, is that we launched this document last month after extensive deliberations, discussions, focus group discussions with the members, with the board members, external stakeholders, so that we can get the right document with us. It has been a practice and tradition for Kenya Association of Manufacturers after every 5 years to prepare the Manufacturing Manifesto. For instance, in 2017, leading to the general elections around August, we prepared the 10-point agenda and we did the mid-term review around 2020 and also end-of-term review in 2021 end in preparation for the document that we're discussing today. And the adoption rate stood at around 80 or 81%, which is not a bad record. It's just a question of ensuring that also this document that we're discussing today will be adopted by the incoming government. And indeed, we have started now discussing with the technical team at the National Treasury, Ministry of Industry, Ministry of Industry, Trade and Enterprise Development, to ensure that the technical working groups that are developing, like now the medium-term plan 4, that is going to be used from 2023 onward for a period of time. It has some of these proposals seated in there, as well as the budget policy statement that will be prepared from September, but also for usage in preparation of the budget and also the finance bill 2023 when the new government is in place. So it's an extensive process ensuring that after the launch, we are engaging as many stakeholders as possible. And that's what we are doing today, engaging the stakeholders, sensitizing them on what is the wish list, or what are the policy proposals for the manufacturing sector when the new government has come in place. If you look at the document, and my board chair, Mr. Shaiko, who is on the corner, is going to make a presentation after this, you see that the document looks not only at the manufacturing centric proposals, but is looking at the general well-being of the economy, because we are a part of this ecosystem. If the general well-being of the economy is not looked into, you realize that the manufacturing sector is likely to suffer in there. So you see the policy proposals that are coming up. They're looking at the macroeconomic level, as well as the manufacturing centric proposals. As I mentioned, as we're meeting the stakeholders, we are also at the moment in the process of seeking appointments with all the presidential candidates as well as the governorship candidates, so that we can share this document and ensure that it's being sitting in the county development plans. And I mentioned this is also seated in like now the budget policy statement, so that we see the implementation of the same. So my wish is that all those who are on this call, we are going to listen keenly to the document that CAM has launched and support in ensuring that the policy proposals enshrined in there, they are adopted by the government, because as I've mentioned, it's not only looking into the manufacturing sector proposals, but generally economic proposals that are going to promote as many sectors as possible, because we are living within a certain economic ecosystem. So I see you, Kwame. I'll stop at that point and welcome our board chair, Mr. Chair Kunyiha, so that he can make the presentation of the Manufacturing Manifesto 2022-2027.
All right, thank you very much. So Mushai, you're welcome. Please go ahead.
Okay, good morning, everyone, and glad to be here. I'll first start by thanking the Institute for inviting us to participate in this, and also for their participation in the work that we did to prepare the manifesto. We worked with them to work on the issues. And I think the general conversations, I think also just creating that space for these conversations around economic matters, the broader economic matters that affect us as Kenyans, it's a great platform. So I've been following some of the webinars. Unfortunately, I'm not able to attend as many as I would wish, but they are good subjects to have and to be exchanging with, because I think it's about us exchanging ideas that will move things forward for this country. So I think Job has put a good background to the manifesto that we put together. I hope it's coming up on your screen. I'm trying to get it up on the screen. Is it up yet?
No, it's not yet. Not yet.
Let me see. Not yet. Okay. I think I'll have to do something else. Let me get it on. Oh, there it is. Was it coming up? Oops, no.
No, not yet. Yes, it's there now.
Okay, in presentation mode, I hope?
Yes, it's on presentation mode. Thank you. Okay,
great. Thanks. So, yes, so I think Job gave a good introduction of how we do our manifestos and what we do about it. And again, just re-emphasizing that the point is to have some points of conversation with all political actors and seeing the issues that are important for manufacturers. In this one in particular, we were also looking at the big changes. If we look back at the Jubilee Manifesto for 2017 and the big four being there was a goal to double manufacturing's contribution to GDP. And we're saying these are big changes. So you're talking about what can really move that flywheel, not just occasionally in our manifestos, we talk about fix these potholes, reduce this cost here, one or two things. But here we were trying to look a bit bigger picture. How do we move this thing significantly rather than just a step by step? So what I'll just take you through is a bit of what we prepared. We had a context, and then the priority issues that we put within the context. And it's important to understand the context so that we know what we are, why we are asking for some of the asks that we have in, or we think are the priority issues for manufacturing. Again, there are very, very many issues that we have in our, that are issues for manufacturing. We have our what we call a manufacturing priority agenda. We discuss with policymakers every year. It's much longer, but here we're saying, how do we prioritize? Because we can't put everything into this manifesto. We needed to be a bit more succinct. So where we are, and I think it's not news, we know manufacturing has not been growing as a share of GDP. We are actually falling. Although the goal was to get us to 15%, we've actually dropped marginally in the last couple of years, and it's you know, the graph is going downwards, as we'll see. We have some issues on competitiveness, joblessness, and fiscal distress, and I'll talk about all these as we go along. There is also a context of the COVID-19 pandemic. We're just getting out of that, and I think to a large extent we've been telling people we are just beginning to get the aftermath, the aftershocks of COVID-19, and the things that it impacted in terms of costs, supply of goods, and so on. So that is already coming through. And if that was not bad enough, we now have a war in Ukraine, and that is already, we are already feeling it. So there is this, when we prepared the manifesto, there was just rumors in Ukraine. Now it's an actual war, and we can see the after effect of that. So some of that is also going to be playing into where we are. So that graph shows us what our percentage in manufacturing has been. And although the big blue bars will show you like we are actually growing output, but as a percentage of GDP, it's lower because we are growing lower than GDP. In fact, our, I think compound growth is something like 3% over that period, while GDP has been growing much faster than that. So we have an issue in terms of manufacturing. And we are saying, yeah, this is an issue. This is not our goal. All governments from inception of independence, we've always wanted to industrialize as a country. So this is not the goal or the dream that we have for our country. We are not achieving what we want to get to. And when we ask ourselves why we are here, one of our big things, I think, is competitiveness. And competitiveness is whether we can produce goods of value and quality that the markets want around us. And we are finding we are declining in that sense, so that people are preferring imports or from other countries compared to our local production a lot more, because consumption is growing, but not our share of that. And where is that coming from? A lot of it is from taxes, and we'll spend quite a bit of time talking about our rising tax regimes, regulatory regime, and so on. And that then led us to, in KM, historically, we spend a lot of time engaging with government around taxes, the best way to structure them and this way. But now we are going backwards and saying, where are these taxes coming from? And why are they always rising? And one of our big issues is, as you know, and those who've been following IEA will know, debt service is one of the big issues. And of course, debt service is not where is the debt coming from? It's a lot of public debt. We've borrowed a lot of money, and I think there's still conversations going on about raising that debt ceiling to get more. So we are borrowing a lot of money that leads to us having to pay back, and that leads to a bigger demand for taxes. And of course, the bottom line of that is the budget deficit. So as long as we keep running budget deficits, we are going to go through that cycle, which will again always leave us with declining competitiveness, and we're in a downward spiral towards less competitiveness, less manufacturing in the market. So that whole budget deficit and the macro side of the economy is actually starting to affect our ability to grow our manufacturing sector. Of course, we've seen this. This is a graph that, again, from IEA, you'll have seen it before. We are getting into fiscal distress. 57% of our revenue is used for debt servicing. This was, I think, the estimate for this current financial year. And if that continues, it means we are really only running on like 43% of our revenue. So even though the taxes are being increased, most of it is going elsewhere. It's not being used either for running services or development, as I would call it. Cost of living, we've all seen the issues that are here, rising costs, and of course, like I said before, the bigger issue is also going to be, this is before the impact of the Ukraine war, and we're going to see that hugely in things like wheat. So I know if the IE has younger people, things like noodles are going to be an issue, spaghetti, chapatis, of course, my favorite. These are all going to become an issue. We import almost 70% of the wheat that we use, and most of that import is from Ukraine or Russia, both of which are now closed markets. So we are really going to be in a fix, and it's like we're going to be in a food crisis for those who are dependent on wheat or like wheat. There is going to be an issue around that, availability as well as cost. So cost of living is going to be a continuing issue for us. So based on that background, if we look at, if these are the kind of the issues that we are looking at, the big issues we are looking at for Kenya, what are some of the issues that we should look at as manufacturers, or that we picked? And those were the 6 issues we picked, and I'll be taking you through each of them and some of the solutions we proposed for them. Of course, all of them do depend on a macroeconomic stable, a stable macroeconomic environment. And we've kind of broadened the macroeconomic stability, as we say, because at some level, the economists will say we've had stable inflation, an exchange rate that is more or less stable. So we've got some stability, but there are other aspects of it that we'll be highlighting that are an issue. So we think, especially where manufacturing is, and we are not really able to plan long term, given the environment we have. And that's, a lot of it is related to taxes. And we think that is so important. People need to know what's going to happen in the next 5 years, 10 years when you're investing, especially for big plant machinery. And we want investment. Yes, we want SMEs to grow, maybe to process nuts or nut oil, avocado, small manufacturing. But we also need big investments. And big investments need longer term planning to understand that the revenue will be there for a long time, or at least it will be stable, where the environment they'll be working in. And for that, we put in some solutions. One of them being the deficit, because anybody who's looking at our economic numbers would say, what are they going to do about the deficit? What is going to happen with their current debt situation? Because at some point, it will have to, reality will meet fiction, whatever. It's going to, the rubber will hit the road. What is going to happen? So we need to be clearer around those things. And one of our big asks here is for NESC, the National Economic and Social Council, to be reinstated, so that we are having these conversations nationally and saying, what are our economic goals and what are our broader economic plans, and that they can be followed through. So here we are saying we must deal with our deficits and debt, because they are going to become a challenge for us. Like I said again, they always end up in taxes. We'll talk a little bit about taxes more. But they always end up in taxes. They always end up in us having to pay for this. So we need some level of stability to understand what is happening around that. Jobs was the second one. And at the end of the day, without incomes, without jobs, our economy is still going to be struggling. This is a graph that shows you our formal sector jobs. And I think formal sector jobs are important because you are able to get taxes from them, people are able to save, and they are a lot more stable. So it is important, and we'll talk a bit more about that. Formal sector jobs are important. The red line there shows you the jobs growth rate as compared to GDP. So what is actually happening is that we've had a jobless GDP growth rate. So the GDP is growing, but the jobs are not growing. And of course, at the end, there was a shrinkage because of COVID, the impact of COVID, some drop in jobs. But manufacturing, the purple at the bottom, has stayed more or less around 300,000 jobs. And that's not good enough. We need to grow these jobs. This is going to be the overwhelming challenge for anybody coming into government now. How do we create jobs? Those jobs will create incomes and value for our economy. So like I said there, we see there's a lot of incomes that you can get and savings, because once you have formal jobs, you are able to save more, whether it's through SACCOs, through banking, financial inclusion. You have stable income. You can do a lot more of that. Decent work also is important, because, the whole thing of turning up every morning, not knowing whether you have a job or an income, is also partly dehumanizing. It's not what the kind of life that we want other Kenyans to live, or all Kenyans to live. We want to be in a place where we have good work. And of course, there's a tax base. We say, as you create jobs, people are able to be taxed, whether it is by the spending they're going to do or pay as you earn. There's a place where you can actually collect their taxes easier. When we try and collect taxes from border drivers, etc., it's just going to be much more difficult than when we have actually formal systems. And of course, primarily is consumption. People with money are going to spend. And when they spend, that spend is going to end up being in the economy. That's how we're going to get more production, and that grows our economy together. It becomes a virtuous cycle that we'll be able to do. So we think there are some solutions that government could help us. We've had already some tax incentives for creating jobs, but of course, it's more about also markets. We'll talk about it, but how you incentivize people to create new jobs is important. So that, especially for young people coming out of college, and helping us, for instance, train them. So there is a expectation people will come out trained, but I don't think industries are so varied and different. It is very hard for people to come out straight out of Polytechnic or TVET knowing what to do. What we really want them to be trained on is how to learn, how to do new things, how to invent, how to solve problems. That's the kind of training we need, so that we link with the universities around that. And our aim, we think we should be aiming for, is to create 300,000 new jobs in manufacturing. If we grow our manufacturing to 15%, which is double what we have, that's what we should be aiming for. Manufacturing exports is another big area. This is a graph comparing Kenya to Egypt and Vietnam. And we picked these countries. We were careful picking the countries because Vietnam is a growing tiger in manufacturing. Egypt is a big competitor in COMESA and also the Africa CFTA. But if we compare ourselves with these, if we look at our exports, what percentage of our export is manufactured? And you can see countries like Vietnam, they are basically exporting only manufactured goods. And by the way, they are a country that is also we are competing with them on exporting coffee. But you can see the level of manufactured goods besides the coffee that they are now doing. In Kenya, we're just at about 28%. In fact, another study we saw, I think only about 6% of companies or firms are exporting. I think that was a World Bank or IMF study in December. So we really have to grow exports. Why do you have to grow exports? As you are manufacturing, where are you going to sell these things? You have to sell them. You have to find markets to sell them. Yes, we push for local uptake and, buy Kenya, build Kenya, but our market is of a certain size. It's not a big market. If we can think about East Africa, the whole of COMESA, Africa CFTA, and the world, if you supply those markets, you have got such a huge opportunity that, we can really grow our manufacturing to some serious scale. And we are saying basically to scale and get bigger capacity, you're going to have to export, find export markets. And the countries that industrialize have all had a big export market. That's the way to industrialize. It gives you an opportunity to integrate and get more complexity. Integration to things like whether it is mineral resources, whether it is to farming. Agriculture is our big thing in Kenya. How can we integrate that so that our avocados, our nuts, how are we exporting them? Can we get avocado oils? Can we get nut oils as well? So that we are getting more complex in what we are making. And then finally, we'll even get to a stage where you make machines that make avocado oil. And that's the ultimate of manufacturing, that you're actually making equipment for manufacturing. Then you are really making the machines that helps us move forward. Of course, there's a foreign exchange earning there that will help us. And here, what we think will help us is getting a tax structure that encourages exports. For a long time, things like VAT refunds and the way they were structured, the way we were paid, was always a disincentive. It costs you too much. In fact, even today, a lot of exporters have a lot of VAT refunds they are having to deal with just to get back paid. And they assumed it was a cost they are going to be paid back. They're not paid back. It starts becoming a loss-making venture. Of course, also there are things like taxes we get for inputs, things like even their minor RDL, IDF, those kind of taxes, they really affect your export competitiveness. When you're competing with China or India, say to sell into the regional market, if you buy goods in China and ship them straight to Rwanda or Uganda, there is no RDL, there is no IDF. That's already a 3%, 4% difference in cost for that importer. And that is, in export markets, your price competitiveness is so critical. You might say 3-4% is small, but it is big when you're talking about export markets. It's a big issue. And we think we can focus, especially EAC and Africa CFTA, once that comes along, very important markets we can deal with. We think that 28%, we should be moving it to 50%. How can we make 50% of our exports manufactured goods? That should be a target where we are setting for ourselves. And then also for the UNIDO CIP, UNIDO has a competitive industrial performance index where they are measuring countries according to how competitive is their manufacturing. And we think Kenya is currently at 115. We should aim to get to number 60. We did the same when we were talking about the ease of doing business. We started in the hundreds somewhere. The government focused on it and we got to number 60, 70 before it was disbanded. So we think we can do it if we pick the right things. And this is also about the complexity of what we make, how much of it we export. That's important for us. So we must think, when we think about growing manufacturing, we must think about exports. It's not just about buying local. Exports is going to be the way we really have a step change in terms of our manufacturing. Raising investment. Again, comparing ourselves with Vietnam and another Kenyan example, African example being Ghana. And investment is important because where are these factories coming from? The factories, somebody has to put money in to create these factories. So money has to come from somewhere. And if you look at these graphs, these are percentages of GDP. We are woefully low at, ending at around 1.3%. Maybe we peaked at 3% of GDP. And this is FDI investment into the country. So we are so low as a percentage of GDP. We are so low. We really have a long way to go. We are basically, and it's also evidence of why we are not growing in manufacturing. Nobody is investing. We are not attracting international investors into our markets, and local as well, because you also want local investment in there. Of course, it means if you get this investment, it's people bringing you cash. They bring you real cash and put solid assets into your economy. And those assets end up working. They are going to end up working one way or another. So we need to really gain them, bring them in. Technology is important. We get technology. A lot of the new investments would come in with new equipment, new technologies that would help us grow our manufacturing efficiency and competitiveness, our competitiveness and productivity. Of course, also what happens sometimes as you get international investors, they are also bringing new markets, because what they're doing, they say we are going to make for Europe or the whole of AFCFTA in Kenya. They will go and develop those markets themselves. They have the brand names, the products into those markets, but you are delivering from here into those markets. So they do half the work for you, and they've created the markets for you. You just need to do the manufacturing. So here again, we say, and this was related to what we were saying, that the macroeconomic side where we are stable, and one of them is a stable tax policy, because we keep shifting our taxes every year. In fact, one of our ask here is that, we need stable, we'll come to stable. Yeah, we want tax policies that stay for like 3 years. It's stable. We've been finding that it keeps moving every budget. We want to tinker with this, change this, and have it's getting too complicated. We need it more stable. We had capital allowances. This is where if you build a factory, you're allowed to write down the cost of that building immediately. These have been removed or scaled back, and that's been a challenge for people, because you're putting in quite a lot of cash. So you need some help in that funding. And of course, it was a non-cash support from government. They'll always look at it like they are losing revenue when you're not paying taxes, but there's no revenue. If there's no investment, there'll be no revenue anyway. So there's no gain there. There was VAT on machinery introduced recently, last year or the year before that, and that is a big challenge, because what you've done is, we used to get a rebate or exemption on machinery for a new factory. You wouldn't pay VAT on it. The assumption being, once you start building, whatever you make will have VAT. Now we're having to pay VAT when you bring in new machinery. That basically means a new factory is about 16% more expensive than it was before. And the cash flow there becomes difficult. You have to borrow that money. If you are already borrowing, it raises how much you have to borrow. It's a big disincentive to investment, a huge disincentive, and an unnecessary one in our view. Then, of course, there is an interest restriction. Currently, there is an EBITDA restriction the government introduced. It came into play, I think, this January. Your interest cost cannot be more than 30% of your EBITDA, your earnings before interest, tax, and depreciation. Now, that is such a low number at 30% that basically anybody who has an investment in a factory is going to be paying taxes already. So your capital allowances will be null and void. You are still going to start paying taxes at the beginning. And that is a big challenge for anybody bringing in new investment. Of course, it's fair to say that we are not the only country in the world. There are other countries. So we are now coming out of practice of what other countries can do. All of these things people can get in other countries, and these are competitor countries, we say, whether you're in China, India, or closer to Uganda, Ethiopia, Egypt, they'll even give you more incentives than these. So why are we're making it harder for people to invest in our country? And we think our goal should be, let's get FDI to 20% of GDP. Of course, also what happens when FDI comes in, it also encourages local investment. And so we're saying it's not just new companies coming in to set up. These companies will come in and invest in existing manufacturers, grow existing manufacturers, find partnerships with existing manufacturers. We can grow the economy that way. Taxation, I touched a little bit about this and how we can make it stable, but there's also a big point about making it simple. I think Kwame was saying, as they had counted the number of pages, was it a bit 1,000 pages of tax? So it's just getting too complicated, too many pages. And the ease and cost of compliance, of course, is also becoming a challenge. I also have to mention things about now how we are getting mixed up with counties. Our current bugbear with like cess, where you're bringing, if you think about like the cess on maize, on grains that they brought in, you're basically taxing a manufacturer for bringing in raw materials. So you're being taxed to buy raw materials, which is like, how are we ever going to manufacture if even before I've made something, I'm paying taxes? So it's just, we need clear tax policy. What are we trying to do? And one of our main things is especially about raw materials and inputs. Those should be no-go areas. You don't tax the materials you're trying to use to make products. Tax the products if you must, but not the raw materials. You're just making it more expensive to produce. And that does not help anyone. Or at least it doesn't help our competitiveness. It's important in that case because, for instance, we've now introduced a new tax on plastic containers. So if you make, say, shampoo, when you the plastic container that you buy and then you put the shampoo in it, you've had to pay some excise tax on that. But I tell you what, if I go to Egypt and make that shampoo and put it in that container, when that container is shipped into this country, there is no excise tax on that container. There will be a duty on the shampoo, perhaps, whatever the level is, and it could be COMESA, so it is reduced, but there is no tax. So the local manufacturer competing with manufacturer in Egypt is already, 5-10% off just because of a tax on a packaging material, which was, I would posit, is unnecessary. So we are creating all these costs that make the local manufacturing more or less competitive, and therefore, the import opportunity looks better, and we are exporting jobs. And this is in so many raw materials that we have, where we are saying you are taxing the raw material, and that is creating problems for manufacturing. So a clear taxation policy would be very good for us. And here we're also asking for 3-year tax schemes, so that, this was again about the stability for long-term planning. And also, and now, tell us, yes, we are changing. So we are going to change, let's do it well and inform. And again, also for Kenyans, we say, if we get into the habit of picking up the changes. Right now, for instance, there's a new ETR, and we were telling KRA, this is a good process you've done. Let's see how this works out. They're introducing a new ETR. We've been taking, they gave us a year's notice. And so people can change, you can look at your systems, how does this work, etc. You can trial it for a period. That's the way we should be doing it. Last year, we had taxes which were introduced on 30th June for implementation on 1st July. Excise tax on the containers, I was telling you. Nobody was registered for excise. People didn't know even where to register. It's just a big mess because you've not even seen the final bill. So we need very good, clear tax policy and a process in how we change and introduce new taxes. Our other big beef is regulation, and it's regulation on top of regulation. And this is just, we've gotten crazy around this. I think as we become more legalistic as a society, we tend to think that everything can be solved by regulation. In fact, I was seeing the other day, after there was the incident with the boda on Forest Road, which is a bad incident, everybody was like, we should regulate. But there was nothing legal about what they were doing. There are enough regulations to stop what had happened. And in fact, the perpetrators are already arrested and so on. So we don't create more regulations. And what we tend to do in Kenya also is that we will probably create a boda authority or a boda regulation, but we will leave the police and we leave the county intact, and NTSA as well. So suddenly, if you are riding a boda, you'll have 4 regulators who are asking you for different things, and you don't really know where to go. So, and that's what has happened in so many areas. Whether it's food, we're having a lot of overlap with KEBS and other regulators. And part of what they bring is just it becomes so complex, and it starts affecting our competitiveness. A big issue of all regulators, and it's a kind of theme going through what we'll be talking about in our manifesto, all regulators come with cost, because immediately the regulator is created, is like, how are we going to fund this? And they're like, oh, the industry will pay for it. So we'll ask them for a license. We'll ask them for an import fee. We'll ask them for something else. So currently we are battling, for instance, the crop nuts and oil regulations from the Agriculture and Food Authority. They're putting 2% on nuts, importing nuts and dealing with nuts and oils. And all this is just because they have no money to operate. So somebody has to pay for them. So what we are saying, for instance, even when those bills come, in terms of our solutions, we should have like one act which brings these fees. Because what also happened with all these regulators, as they bring in fees, there's no coordination around which fees are we bringing in. So you find products or manufacturers with getting multiple fees and levies on top of each other because there is no coordination with these bodies. These bodies they act independently of each other and start charging fees and levies. So there is an act here which we believe can solve some of these issues. There's a Better Regulation Commission proposal. This is a British idea where they've gotten people to sit together and start saying, let's create better rules. Because not only are the rules multiple, too many of them, they are not always designed for to be obeyed. We have more sticks than carrots. So instead of giving us regulations that will give us a pathway to adherence or to perform, all of them are about beating people. So it's kind of like, in fact, most regulations we create today is that if you break the regulation, we will close your factory. And sometimes it is just like, it is what we'd call minor things. They are not things that are affecting everything. They are things which can be rectified. In some cases, for instance, even in NEMA, although they don't use it, they have orders for rectification. A NEMA inspector can come to your factory and tell you, solve this problem within the next 7 days, or we will close you down. But most of our regulations are no, close down, and we'll talk about it later. And that does not help anybody in terms of whether we are going to grow the business, whether people become better at or following regulations. So we need something more standardized around it. And finally, of course, there is a public participation bill in terms of how are people participating. There's been a lot of jurisprudence, people going to court about public participation, and we think this bill would really help people understand what is public participation and what is proper and sufficient public participation. Our goal on this one is, can we reduce our regulations by 50%? Let's be ambitious. We have too many regulations. In fact, we had a table, if you see in our manifesto, people are paying 30, 40 licenses just to operate to different places on different issues. And we need to reduce these, because sometimes it's even, where are you paying? Can these sometimes be combined together? So a reduction in regulation would be a big idea. We've done it before. When the Kibaki government first came in 2003, there was a huge task done to reduce these regulations. A lot of licenses, fees, etc. were removed, and we also, what happened in the economy, things did pull up, but we've built them back up. So we need to keep them down, and perhaps the Better Regulation Commission would help to keep a limit on those regulations. Public goods and services, here we say now, government has a role, but we think they should also focus on their role and giving it to us at a better, in a better way, in a better enhanced way. So for us, it's about, can they look especially around efficiency? How can they make things more efficient for us? Things clearer as well. Clearer rules are better for us, which is again related to regulation and so on. And then ease and cost of accessing public goods and services. Those are key things that they need to look at as we go along. So we are saying, first, reduce the cost of public goods. If we look at things like SGR, other infrastructure things they're doing, are we looking at what is actually going to be the cost of using these public goods? Yes, we've created them, but how are we going to be able to pay for them? What are we going to be charging people for them? We want industrial policies at national and county level. Of course, our manifesto is addressed to national and counties. So at county level especially, we're saying, let's get clearer industrial policy that integrates all these issues that we are raising. And then also for infrastructure, we've had a lot of infrastructure growth, but to some extent, we would say we focused on one type of infrastructure, which is visible, big, and kind of transport infrastructure is what has been focused on. But we have what we call invisible infrastructure, things that actually matter to manufacturers. So things like water, and I would add their waste management. If we look at water and sewers, when was the last sewer project we had in Nairobi, Mombasa, or Kisumu, any of these big industrial towns, or any towns for that matter? What have we ever done about wastewater management? Well, are we building those kind of infrastructure? And even waste, even normal waste. We've seen what Dandora is like, etc. Dandora is now served by, I think, 5 counties, because none of these counties have these issues. And this is crucial infrastructure that is necessary for us to urbanize and to actually grow our market. The same with, water, electricity, at least we can see work is going on around that. And there is also information itself, because what we find is it is very difficult to get information around manufacturing. How can we get like KRA to actually avail good information for us so that we can tell who are the manufacturers of different products, how much is being imported, how readily accessible is this kind of information that helps businesses, not just manufacturing, be able to invest and make some sort of decisions. So there's a lot of that kind of soft infrastructure that we think needs to be addressed. Let me go back here. Again, here we think then something like the National Economic and Social Council would be great for this kind of thing, helping government decide what are the crucial infrastructure that's going to help us move things forward and move the needle for manufacturing and everything. So in summary, coming to the end of it, these were our big targets, asks that we put in our manifesto, dealing with deficits and debt as a priority for any government, creating new jobs, focusing on exports and our industrial competitiveness, increasing FDI, stable tax schemes and regulations, and reducing regulations, and of course, overall is reintroducing the National Economic and Social Council as something that will help us navigate these issues and also pick priorities, because I think one of the challenges has been in the past that, yes, there are good things to do. Infrastructure is a good thing to build, etc. But what is the priority at what time? What is the sequencing and the prioritization of those issues? So that, in a nutshell, was our presentation and our manifesto that we put together. So back to you.
Okay, thank you very much, Mushai. So I won't summarize in detail, but I'll say, basically it started with I think like a state of play. What are the main issues that trouble the country? And you identified 4 of them. And then out of that context, then went to what should be the solutions, some of which are connected directly to manufacturing, but some of them are related to the fact that, look, if you're going to save an economy or get the economy going forward, we just need to do this. So the first, I think, is essential, basically asking government, look, regardless of what happens, I think we must seek macroeconomic stability. A stable macroeconomy is important, which requires us to obviously eliminate the deficits. So that's the first. And the second is the question of jobs. I think every political party and every voter should be more keenly watching to who's trying to create jobs using what mechanisms. Growing export, manufacturing exports, or at least expanding exports generally, but manufacturing exports to constitute 50% of all exports, chasing both Egypt and Vietnam. And I think the numbers that were placed here just show that it's not impossible. It's a sensible requirement, actually, Kenyan, completely necessary for the transformation that is sought. The fourth is basically raising FDI, which is also connecting to growing exports. Part of making sure that exports are developed, as Mushai said, would be many of the people who conduct FDI tend to also have linkages with specific markets, and they can create backward linkages with farms in Kenya, but at the same time have markets. So obviously, the opportunity for exports and FDI go together. Then taxation policy, which in Kenya is a fine mess. Yes, you're right. Kenya's income tax code alone, if you put together the income tax code, is almost 1,200 pages based on what the changes that have been made and all that. And that's before you add excise, and if you add VAT and everything else. Kenya's taxation is just basically completely Byzantine. And I think it requires one tax head and another tax head are charging taxes for the same thing, and it's never clear why you should have excise tax, for instance, on certain goods. So it's clear that it's simply chasing revenue by all means. Reducing regulation, I think another one that helps actually everybody, including government itself, if it learned that with the smarter regulation necessarily without even adding, reducing taxes, sometimes just creating time for business people to actually do their business management as opposed to filling paper and shuffling it between one office and another would be extremely useful for their efficiency. The provision of public goods. I think public goods is important. Just the quality of water, for instance. So yesterday, we had, in preparation for this meeting, maybe I should mention that we had a Kenyan who's a very small level manufacturer doing specific niche manufacturing for spas. So this is a Kenyan lady who's identified specific spas, and they know that Kenyans like to take care of themselves, all good. And so she manufactures material for spas, and which she doesn't think luxury, but basically specific dishes. And one of the things she discovered is that she wanted to establish a specific small plant and was prepared to go all those things in one place. And she just realized that the quality of water that was available where she had land would not allow her to actually manufacture the kind of high quality stuff that she hopes to not only sell domestically, but also export. So basically the quality of water that is available to use, the inputs are available, the quality of water is not sufficiently high to even meet the KEBS standard. Telling you something that maybe KEBS should actually also be looking to ensure that the quality of water that is provided. And this is someplace within Nairobi and 20 kilometers or so. I found that really, really interesting. So yes, that public good focus that Mushai stressed. And then the final one basically is NESC. I think establishing the National Economic and Social Council, which many business people actually ask about because it worked efficiently at an earlier time, and I think it's one thing that should be restored. So I've tried to summarize very, very quickly the 8 major points that were priority issues and solutions that the Kenya Association of Manufacturers did. Yes, as I as well, we are proud of being associated with CAM working on this, helping with some checking data and stuff like that. And I think it's a report that we commend to you. I provided a copy of the report, and it comes in two forms: an abridged version of the report and the full report, which is available, and the link is provided in the chat box here. So ladies and gentlemen, now I'll open up this opportunity for you to ask questions. And remember, there's Mushai, the chair of the Kenya Association of Manufacturers, and together with his colleague, Job. So if you have any questions for CAM, that would be useful. If you have any questions about this, the manufacturing manifesto, Mushai is here. Now, there are 2 questions in the chat box, but I'd like to also provide an opportunity for you to raise your hands by just raising your hand and asking. But there are already 2 questions, so I'll pose them to Mushai as a way for all of you to raise your hands. Oh, so one is from David, congratulating you, Mushai, for an excellent presentation and good recommendations. And then we have one, Wekulo, who's asking, could Mushai give some comments on the progress to get the government to act on these proposals? And you add that tax incentives and friendly investment policies have been with us for a while. Are we seeing progress, or are we taking steps back?
Yeah, okay, thanks. Yeah, thanks for the questions. And I think there was one also earlier, sorry, I saw on the chat about the ease of doing business rating. I think it's kind of related to that, whether we've gotten some progress. So I think we do get progress on different issues. On this one, obviously not yet, because this is like we said, we released in February. We are hoping to engage the political parties on it. We have engaged with some of them, and so now we are waiting to see whether it gets into their manifestos. That will be our success in that sense, is seeing it in their manifestos. So we do get different successes at different times. But one of the big issues around this, and I think is also why we are talking about NESC, is we are trying to say, can we get a comprehensive one? Because sometimes you get, it's being dished out like medicine, is what we say. We're just being given one benefit here, one here, and then you expect it to kind of boom and get this 15%. And we are saying, look, you have to look at this thing holistically. None of the countries that industrialized did it by just 1 or 2 things. In fact, the challenge is sometimes in Kenya, we are looking for magic bullets. That one thing that we are going to do, and then we will take off economically. It is not. It's a whole systemic thing. So you have to do many things at different places to get things moving. So something like ease of doing business, it did help. And it has moved some things like paying taxes. The digitization of KRA is definitely a big boon if we say the last 10, 15 years. What they've done is quite impressive, and what we're able to do electronically now. So those things, and those have helped with the speed of doing things. So there's a lot of digitization that we have done. We have every year we are engaging with government around taxes, tax incentives, how to especially tax administration as well, how we are actually going to pay. So we do get those wins. But yes, we get a lot of losses as well. We are constantly fighting about different taxes. Can we win this one? Can we get that one? And it doesn't always work. I want to also take us back to, and that's what is taking us back to the issue, like I said at the beginning in the context, about the budget deficits. In the past, we've spent a lot of our time talking about the particular taxes and what that tax looks like. But we are beginning to ask, and Kenyans have, in fact, I saw a headline today. It's almost like we are celebrating a 3 trillion budget, like it's a very nice thing that we're going to get a 3 trillion. I think we need to be cautious because who is going to pay for it? So that each time there's a budget, we keep asking, who is paying for this budget? Or how are we going to pay for it? Eventually, we all pay for it through taxes. And so there is an argument for us that this growth of budgets every year is not good for us. It's not necessarily a good thing, especially when we are at the economic state we are in, the context of coming out of COVID and the Ukraine war. What size of budgets should we be doing so that we engage government around those issues? Yeah. Over to you, back to you.
All right. Thanks, Mushai. There are 2 other questions. No, actually 3. You talked about tax incentives, but Emmanuel, who's my colleague at the IE, has asked 2 questions, so maybe you should respond to these 2. So he asks, what opportunities for Kenyan and regional manufacturing do you see with the DRC accession into the EAC? So that's not entirely related to the manifesto, but I think it would be important about what kind of posture any new administration should take. And then, and what would you say about the development path for that? So yeah, you can respond to that.
Yeah, so DRC is interesting. I think as we grow markets, like I mentioned, we think export markets are important. Our ability to access export markets to get our products in, that will create markets for us. And DRC is definitely a big population. I think they have more population than us, and but it's a big country. I think one of the big challenges with DRC is access. So yes, they will be in the EAC, but other than the eastern part of DRC, access, and I think maybe that's eastern, southeastern, and northeastern, and just the eastern side. It's very hard to access DRC because you can't really get across it. So there is a market. How to access it is different. It will be different. We will be also opening up for them to. I think what we'll be doing is helping them develop and open up. But there are also challenges of things like language. Do they speak? There is a lot of we learn Lingala and maybe some French to be able to get around. And also, let's say systems. I think what had happened in EAC, because we've been together for a while, we've kind of grown at the same pace. So if when I was talking about KRA and their tax systems improving, if you go to Uganda, the same thing has happened. There is some sort of alignment or convergence is what I think they call it. There's convergence around systems about things like standards. So we've been working on that. Now DRC will be coming from a bit behind on that. We don't know what systems they have. And my understanding is that it's not very well controlled. I think they don't have all the systems that we would expect or we see in other EAC countries. So there will be some growth path, but it will be good for us, good market to get into. We will just have a lot of hurdles that we need to get on to get in there. So in terms of exposure to the global value chain, in fact, again, both because of COVID and now, we're just actually at the right point in time in history when everybody is asking, how are we going to rejig our supply chains? Because there was a time now pre-COVID, everybody was focusing on efficiency. Efficiency was the first thing or the primary thing, and cost efficiency. And cost efficiency is best at scale. And so scale, everything was being centralized and scaled. So you'd find India, China, South Asia, everything was concentrated there. But now that we start seeing things like pandemics, disease, you start thinking the reality of war can break out. What is going to happen in terms of supply chains? People are beginning to think we must diversify. So we can now expose ourselves and say we are ready for this, and we can show people what we are. But again, like I said, people start looking at the front line before they even visit. They start looking at top line desktop studies is what you'd call them. What's the tax regime there? Is it stable? What's the FDI? Are other people going in there? Because the other thing FDI does, it, everybody's buying. It's the way people got into Bitcoin or whatever. Everybody's buying. Let's all buy. So if there's FDI coming into the country, people are like, oh, that's a good place. People are going there. Let's go look. Let's go see. Let's go find out the opportunity. Put ourselves on the world map in that sense. A lot of work done by Keproba, trying to get ourselves out there, but it's also about the nitty-gritties of the system. What is in the system that people can, when they ask the questions, we've got the answers for them, which are clear and useful. And these are the kind of questions. The things we are putting here are the things we think manufacturers ask about. How long is this tax regime going to be? We've got, of course, our EPZs and SEZs as an opportunity. Again, I would say it's mixed, whether people are being able to get their SEZ licenses. How clear is it? How easy is it to get that and keep moving? So those are some of the things we must do. We must first advertise ourselves, and then you must actually have examples of people who bring other people to the market as well. Thanks. Back to you, Kwame.
All right. Thanks. Some of our colleagues don't want to appear, but they have written quite a number of questions. So let me just ask you the next one. So she says, Itoto Itakara, she says, she's a member of the IEA. Thanks, Itoto. She says, thank you for your presentation. And she asks, has a single business permit had any effects, either positive or negative, within the manufacturing sector? Challenges around licensing and their possible solutions. I think you mentioned one of these things as one of the issues about better regulations. So licensing might be one. Let me put two to you at the same time, then we will come back. And then Gitao Gidongo asks, as the Kenya Association of Manufacturers tracked over the last decade or so, the pattern of tax disputes and their resolution, have manufacturing sector players been able to contrast costs and time incurred in resolution of disputes with KRA against revenue authorities in other jurisdictions, say ESC or COMESA? So those two questions, I hope they're clear.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, thanks for those. My joke about the single business permit, because I remember once at the beginning of the year, you signed for 15 different licenses, and the last one is called the single business permit. So you wonder what were the other 15. So everybody's wall has a single business permit and 15 others to decorate it. So, it doesn't work. It doesn't work within the county. Even within the counties themselves, they tell you it's a single business permit and then ask you for multiple others, advertising, parking, whatever. They're still giving you multiple. And then even worse has been a challenge for us. There's a bill we were trying to get. It was the county own source revenue bill, where it doesn't work across counties. In fact, there are 2 court cases, at least we are aware of, trying to challenge this, so that if I get a single business permit, here I am in Nairobi, if I go to Kiambu, they're like, no, you need another business permit to operate in this place, to sell, even to drop goods. Sometimes you're just delivering goods, they want you to get a permit. If you brand your car, you have to pay. I mean, most of our cars have like 10, 15 business permits, depending on the region they're operating, for advertising. So it hasn't really worked. And although, let's say at national government, there's been they say it, we talk about it and we say, even sometimes at county council of governors, they'll say, yes, we want a business permit. When you're driving around and you're stopped by a council guy, it's like, we are going to spend the day here and charge you in court, or you need another permit. So it becomes another big challenge. And of course, the cost is a problem, because, these costs build up as you do multiple, but it's also this thing of having to pay different places, different licenses. They are neither standardized in cost or type of license. So, each county has its own rules. So it hasn't really been working. That's been a big big challenge. I like Itao's question as well, because we've actually been debating this the other day, because KRA has also not only had a pattern of many tax disputes, which of course there is a lot of taxpayers will take them to either the tribunal or to court when they argue. And we were actually debating how many of them are they winning or losing, because sometimes they are also appealing. So they will lose at the tribunal, KRA will lose at the tribunal and immediately go to KRA and say that they want to, to the court to appeal the tribunal. And these things go on and on. We've had one, you go to High Court, you win, they immediately go with it. It's almost like automatic, they want to appeal it to the Court of Appeal and lose again. So again, there's a lot of litigation, and we've been debating with KRA what is their litigation strategy. Now there's, of course, it's also about how they're interpreting them. They're interpreting the tax laws very aggressively, and that can be a problem. Rather than clarifying, you want to interpret it aggressively. So, and ideally what you should do, if there's a gap in the tax law, you fill it with legislation, not with an aggressive implementation. Because, and the way the courts always read tax is strictly read. So if it doesn't say there's a tax, you cannot assume or impute a tax. It must be clearly stated. The only thing I can give you a quip just to say, some of our legal advisors tell us now that KRA has made them very busy, actually, that you find doing a lot of their work is just going to court against KRA. So there has been a lot of work created for lawyers. I don't know whether that's growing the economy at some level, dealing with these issues. I'm not sure where we are with EAC and other COMESA countries in the same way, because I actually don't have visibility on that. But it's related to how aggressive KRA is on collecting taxes and how clear the tax laws are again. That also brings us to things like public participation. When we look at something like minimum tax, which we are glad to say it's one of the cases we managed to beat KRA on in court. And we were challenging them on very clear, open legal issues around the regulations they made about it, the way minimum tax was put. We spent a lot of time before when the bill was being proposed and telling them, look, these are challenges. You better clarify this, put this thing in the law, etc. We were not ignored. We were ignored, rather. We were not listened to. So those things end up becoming legal issues. So I think there's an issue about how we are writing those tax laws that is becoming a problem. So yeah, that's a challenge for us that we need to deal with. Yeah. So back to you, Kwame.
All right. Okay. I have two other questions, and I was just wondering whether Job would like to help the chair by adding a few things before I ask these two questions, which might be the final ones. Job, do you have any questions? Anything you'd like to respond to? Okay, well, let me see then. So we have these two other questions, again, from my colleagues at the IEA. I'll allow Job to speak finally. But so the question that is being asked to you, Mushai, is, what is the most advanced product that Kenya could possibly make in the next year or 5 years? And how is the present configuration of regulations and infrastructure hampering this best case growth trajectory? In other words, what someone's just asking, what's the best growth trajectory that you see for manufacturing sector, and what is its biggest, what's the impediment towards reaching it? And the second one from my colleague John as well, he concedes that burdensome taxation and regulatory regimes exist notwithstanding. What do you think is our biggest hurdle to realizing 20% FDI target? Yeah, that's an interesting one as well. Okay. Yes.
Yeah, it's a good one. The most advanced product Kenya can make. I don't think there are any limitations on what we could make, especially if you give us a year or 5 years. We're already looking at, say, and you know, the different sectors look at it differently. We're already looking at like vaccines and biotechnology, and there's quite a lot going on around biotechnology at small scale at the beginning. So I'm always amazed, actually, when you look around and visit manufacturers, what they're able to do at the moment. We've even got some additive manufacturing. this 3D printing already happening. There are companies doing it in Kenya. We have, what do you call this? There was some kind of nanotechnology and computer boards being printed. I think there was something being opened in, I think the president opened up something in Nyeri. Was it Dedan Kimathi University or something? There was a little fab lab, they call them fab labs, being created there. So there are some different things you could do without, say, too much investment. And actually, and I think I'll ask Kwame about that. We were talking about the complexity of the products that we make. There are some things which are actually quite complex, which is, even if it just starts from agriculture, in terms of the skill that is required to develop it. So there are some complex products we do make and we can grow. In fact, one of them I like to say is like even in agriculture, like roses. Although we sell roses, to get the rose to a right color that you're going to be able to sell. Of course, these red roses are common, but then there are other colors that you see. That's like a 7-year, 6-year process, which happens in Kenya as well. It's about propagating the roses and so on. So there is quite a lot we could do in 5 years. And it depends on the different sectors, whether it's in the small manufacturing. I think where we might have a challenge is the bigger manufacturing. And sometimes we do get stuck on those things about like creating, let's say, electric cars. So we can always assemble electric cars, but now maybe creating lithium batteries and so on, that's going to take quite a while. That requires a whole supply chain of manufacturing that is not available. But again, you have to start somewhere, and then you will build it into this situation. So you start with one product. We are talking about a good one is like pharmaceuticals. Currently, there's a lot of pharmaceutical manufacturing, but with a lot of imported raw materials. So how can we start making some of these raw materials based on what we have locally? We have things like, especially from agriculture, things like milk. Actually, there is casein. There's casein, which is an extract of milk that is used for in pharmaceuticals. We could make that because we have milk. What is it that we'd need to get into that? We have herbal extracts, which we could get out of. We can grow herbs very easily, so we can get extracts out of that. So I think the sky is the limit in terms of what we could get. Now, in terms of tax and regulation, what is the biggest hurdle to realize 20% FDI? I think it's actually competitiveness, because, by the way, although we talk about the regulations and so on, we are not. If you take countries like India or even say parts of China in different sectors, their manufacturers will also complain about these regulators and how to make regulations easier. But the one thing they are always keen on, both from their government side and their manufacturers themselves, is their competitiveness. What is the price that you're able to make the final product at and put it out in the market? So what we need is just to show that we can make something competitive. In fact, at that point, FDI is not about calling people. People come. People go to China because it is cheap to manufacture there, and people can get things done. It's the same thing in Vietnam. They know they can see their competitors are there and producing at a lower cost. So we have to have that real focus of how are we going to make this lower cost manufacturing. So that's things about electricity, which people are already talking about. Electricity, about transport, about labor. What is the labor productivity? And labor is not just the price you pay for the labor, but how much can they actually produce when you pay them, and their ability to learn and grow. So it is those things are combined are what are going to help us. So I put it down there as competitiveness as the biggest thing, because people will be like, I can go to Kenya and make these, I can make this mouse or, the phone. I can make it in Kenya and sell it in the world at a price that is going to competitive. If I can do that, if you can show people that, they will come. That is probably the biggest challenge. Now, what we say is that the tax and regulatory thing make it difficult for us to be able to compete, to make something that we'll be able to sell to the world, and that causes the challenge. And I want to link also that FDI to the export market. So because we are not exporting too much, the only FDI we are getting is for maybe attracting is for people who want to manufacture for our local market, and that's a small market. So you must be able to attract FDI that is going to manufacture for global markets, because they are going to make here and send it around the world. That's when you start getting that number of FDI, because they can see the markets are much, much bigger for what we need to do. Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Okay. Fine. I'll come to. We've just received a question on Twitter, so I'll ask that as well. And then there's a question on the chat box too, but it looks like it's an income tax question. But so let me ask. So someone is asking that he asks, what sustainable competitive manufacturing is possible in Kenya when we have 100 shillings per kilowatt hour feed in tariff power and 4 in Ethiopia. In other words, this person is asking, to what extent is Ethiopia eating Kenya's lunch by virtue of having a lower feeding tariff compared to Kenya? So that's the first. And the second one is CPA Samuel Murage is a guest. He says that I was filling income tax returns for a corporate client recently, but the return form is also computing minimum tax to compare with actual tax due. Why is this the case, yet minimum tax was suspended by a court? If that is really the case, I think it's telling me one of the reasons why we really need a national tax policy. The idea that the Revenue Administration Service can work with impunity, even against what the courts have held, is not very good for taxation, because most taxation in the world, for taxation systems to scale, you need high levels of compliance. So you can't sue 5 million Kenyans, to be honest. I mean, it's not possible, even if you have the power to. So it's important for the Revenue Service to itself show that we will obey the laws, because the laws we are reading to you regarding your tax obligations are actually based on law. So if that is happening, then I'm really, really surprised that it doesn't understand to what extent it's undermining its own confidence with the public, so that we don't play the lottery of thinking, okay, I'll never comply and let's hope they catch me, but they can't catch 6 million people. And that's not a good way for the taxation service to go. But anyway, Musha, you can let us know what you think about the minimum tax feed-in tariffs.
Yeah, power cost. I was wondering how to answer it. So yeah, the power tariffs are very important, and by the way, even transport costs, all these things are important, and especially when you look at them collectively, all together. So what is happening in places like Ethiopia? So yes, Ethiopia has a low power cost, but they don't have a free floating exchange rate. So that becomes, a challenge for them. So they are getting some investment based on people who need high power, a lot of power to produce, will be attracted there. But then they have to think about things like exchange rate. Do they need exchange rate to move around and so on? So Ethiopia has benefits. All countries have certain benefits and certain losses. So again, our power cost, we've been saying, and we've gotten some respite now. I think there was even some discussions recently. There was an IEA webinar on that, on the PPAs. Yes, we are paying too much. And again, it's what is the value of this power? But it's, at the end of the day, it's what you're producing, how much power it requires. So even for us, because whenever power costs get down, we get into this, is it public debate, is why aren't the cost of goods going down, etc. But in some industries, power cost is literally 2-3% of the cost. So yes, when you reduce it, you get, it will go down by 1% or something, the cost. So you may not feel what the cost is. But in certain industries, it's 20, 30, 40% of the cost. So in those industries, you find those high intensity power industries, which would be like things like steel, things that use a lot of heat, cement, large industries that use a lot of heat, energy, they tend to be quite affected by power costs. So there again, we start to struggle. And that's why people can import cement from China or wherever else and still have it at a reasonably low price because of the difference in the cost of power. But there are many other industries that you can do. So for instance, I'm not sure exactly what the power cost is right now, and especially since the Ukraine war. In Germany, power cost is actually higher than Kenya, but they are bigger exporters than us by far, big factors. But why is that? Because it's what they export. They are not exporting just oil. They are exporting high value like bearings, precision equipment, big manufacturing plants. So they are manufacturing high value items, which means that the impact of the power cost is a little bit lower. Now, for a country like us in Kenya, because we are still lower down on the manufacturing, in our manufacturing story, the development of manufacturing, we are still doing relatively basic manufacturing, and we need to compare ourselves with the competitors who are, because you didn't mention, even Egypt is still also pretty low. I think they're around 8-9 cents for their kilowatt. So you would still be competing against them and what their power cost is. So we still, when we are looking at our power cost, we need to compare with those guys. But so, like I said, it's a difficult answer in one is to say we need to look at overall cost. And so power is one of the costs. And if we can reduce it, we reduce it because you're trying to get the overall cost down. And then secondly, start looking at the products that we can produce that do not require high energy use. If we cannot, or we don't meet the threshold of the energy use, there's some we'll still keep producing, but those are the kind of perspectives we have on them. Yeah. Thanks, Kwame.
All right. Thanks. Some more questions here. We have one from one more from Gitao Gidongo. Oh, Abdulrahman Gorod says, good discussion. This is appreciated. Thank you, Abdulrahman. We have two other questions. One from Gitao Gidongo, and Gitao asks, under the theme of competitiveness, how do land costs per square meter in designated manufacturing areas compare to other African countries? In other words, says, how do the costs of land in designated manufacturing places in Kenya provide an opportunity for competitiveness, or to what extent does it undermine it? It's somewhat related to the question you've spoken about the full costs. There are trade-offs to be made, but I think that's an important one as well, because cost of land in Kenya, manufacturing cannot happen without land, right? You need to establish warehouses, you need to establish places for the plant to be based on. And the second question is from Victor, and he's talking about the fact that given that the Special Economic Zones program could mitigate some of the expectations in the manifesto, such as increase in FDI, fiscal incentives, an increase in employment, what is the status in terms of the East African Community's Special Economic Zones policy negotiations? And what are the suggestions in terms of implementation of the program in Kenya? Since access to the incentives will be a challenge, given that SSE program regulations are not catered for under the East Africa Common Market arrangements because the negotiations are incomplete. Shay, so back to you.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I'll answer the first one. I'll ask Job to help on that, the SEZ and ECMA. You can deal with that. But yes, I think one of our challenges with land cost is, and it's broad across Kenya, is that we have not designated land. And we've been asking counties to do that for particular purposes. And because of that, land tends to drift towards the highest cost. And I think it's the same challenge there. People are debating about like land in Kiambu and agriculture, because you can change the use from agriculture to say residential. You find the highest value starts coming up for that, because again, we were talking like if you do have a tea farm in Limuru, it will never give you the return that you'll get for a house, because you can, I can't remember, we were trying to work out, I think it's what you'd get per acre per year. And then you compare what you'd get if you sold an acre of that land, it would be huge. So in other countries, what they do is you just have an area, we say this is a manufacturing area. So whoever is building here is just going to buy manufacturing land. And there's a price of manufacturing land that is lower. Then you're having to compete with apartments and malls for that land. And I think, by the way, the other issue that it has brought for us in places like around Kitengela, Athi River, is what was previously industrial land being used for housing. And then the people come into the houses and start complaining about the noise and the dust from the manufacturing site. And we are like, the manufacturer was here. We were here before you. So, this was the land designated for manufacturing. Can we separate the two? So there's a thing about land use that is important. So we are getting, yes, pretty expensive land. And again, depending on what you're manufacturing, it becomes a big issue, because if you need large pieces of land, it's hard to find them. The second one to add to that is, we were talking earlier about the government goods and services. It's about infrastructure. So you find in places like China, and these are places where they've created SEZ zones. And I think that was the idea also here with SEZs, is that you build an SEZ with its infrastructure. And infrastructure includes power, water, and roads. So it's not just about the roads, and the roads are done internally. So in fact, one of the issues we have with the cost per square meter is that, yes, I can buy my land, but then now I have to build the road. I have to draw power for, 3 kilometers, 2 kilometers to get my power in here. I have to dig a borehole, and then I have to have a wastewater treatment. So these are things which start adding to the cost. They are kind of infrastructural issues, which if they were provided, I would not have that issue. I should be able to just tap into power from outside my gate. Maybe water, again, is just a pipe, and then my sewer connection or whatever wastewater connection. There's a level of treatment I must do, and then the rest is done perhaps industrially at an industrial level. So there's some of that, and I think that was part of the thinking behind developing SEZ, so that you put these hubs together, these industrial hubs together. I'll ask, Job, a bit more on the SEZ.
Job, are you here?
Oh, he might have talk or something. I'll be okay. So I'll be stuck with this one. I was throwing it to him because I'm not very current on where we are on this, but I know, yes, the SEZ have been a challenge. But how they were getting around the ECMA, I think, is that and of course we also have an EPZ scheme. An EPZ is where you're manufacturing just to export. And what would happen is, from the SEZ, if you manufacture and want to sell into the local market, there is a boundary there. It's like a customs zone. So SEZ is a customs-free zone. And in that market, so there in the SEZ, you don't pay, say, on the raw materials that you're bringing in. There are some certain tax incentives, etc., that you'd get for the company in there. In fact, one of our arguments is, why shouldn't the whole of Kenya be an SEZ, so that we help everybody in manufacturing grow there? I don't need to be necessarily in that zone. But yes, if you bring in your goods from an SEZ into Kenya, you then fall under ECMA. So you have to pay in, if there are duties to be paid to bring them into the market, you're going to have to pay those duties. And there would be a KRA officer, and that's why they put them in zones, so that goods are moving from the SEZ into the local market or going into the export market. So that's one of the issues around, or that was one of the solutions around them. But I'm not exactly sure where EAC is on generating a standardized SEZ program.
Okay. All right. So we're coming to the tail of the conversation, and we've just been informed by Toto that a point of information, she's just seen the Senate, the County Licensing Uniform Procedures Bill of 2019. To be honest, I hadn't heard about it, and it seems to be addressing some of the licensing issues as raised. So thanks for letting us know about that. We'll look at it and update ourselves about the extent to which it resolves some of the creases that we've spoken about. We don't have any other questions.
It's been around, that's the bill, and we've been pushing for it to reach its end. Again, it was done in Senate, it will still need to go to National Assembly. Right. So it's,
All right, so thanks a lot. So Mushai, since Job isn't here, I'd ask you to make any final comments, and then we'll close the meeting, because we're just 5 minutes away from what time we promised. Yeah.
So thanks. Thanks a lot, and thanks everybody for the engagement. Thanks, IE, for the invitation. I think for us, the key thing is about having these conversations. And I just, again, emphasize that our economic development is not going to be a magic bullet. There are no 1, 2, 3 things that you need to do. There's a whole basket of things that you need to do. But the focus, again, is about competitiveness. How are we going to have competitive manufacturing? And whatever else you're bringing, whatever solutions, whatever things are being brought in, is asking, does this make our manufacturing more competitive and competitive on a global scale? Because we are in a globalized environment. Well, people will talk about the wars and COVID reducing globalization, but it's not going away. We are still going to be in a globalized environment. People are going to be trading across borders. And if people can buy biros from China, they are going to be comparing the price of a biro in China and a price of a biro in Kenya. And why can we not get our price of our biros in Kenya at the same price or cost that is being done in China? There are things we can do about that. So it's a general orientation that we need. We need to be looking at a certain direction, focusing on certain issues around making ourselves more competitive, which is about reducing cost, adding value, and making things more efficient. Those should be the focus things that we need to do. And it's a conversation we need to continue. So I hope all the people on the webinar and with the IEA, they've been pushing it as well. We raise these issues, keep them at the forefront of our politicians' minds. That's the game. That's the end game of our manifesto, is to get it in the front of people's minds and saying these are the things that help us develop our economy as we go ahead. So thank you very much, Kwame. Over back to you.
Right. Okay. Thanks. So students of economic history will know one thing, that I think there are about 200 members of there are 202 members of the United Nations. More than 80% of those, which is about 140, 150 nations, have less than an income per capita of less than $10,000 per person per year. Of the countries that have an income per capita of less than of more than $10,000 per year, all of them have a manufacturing sector their transition from low income to high income took place through rapid growth of manufacturing. So when Mushai says that, yes, there's no silver bullet to development, there isn't. But one of the things that it tells us is one of the rail tracks on which you must run towards greater development. And development is about making sure that farms are successful, and therefore people can earn higher incomes, is manufacturing. So the commitment of the IEA to it is just basically to say that Kenya, as an early stage middle income country at a $1,500 level, $2,000 level, there's no way we're going to meet the objectives of the Vision 2030, the Big Four, without manufacturing being a major engine for that growth. I know we use the word engine very, very liberally in Kenya, but that's just the reality, because the history suggests so, and our ambitions suggest that we should reflect on that history. So today we had the Kenya Association of Manufacturers, and specifically the chair, making a presentation to us on the manufacturing manifesto. And specifically the title is Delivering the Manufacturing Opportunity, and we are glad that they're seeking opportunities to discuss with all political configurations that might come in. And it's not just at the national level. There are plans to also make presentations to the Council of Governors, and specifically governors, because real manufacturing happens in land, and it therefore happens within a county. So that connection is part of the reason why we're here. They've identified 8 issues. There's certain structural problems that only government can deal with to allow businesses to get better. And so we are glad that the Kenya Association of Manufacturers, their chair and their colleagues, Job and obviously Phyllis, allowed us to host this meeting today. And we can see that many of you were here, I think, for 1.5 hours and a little more. We are thankful for Mushai for taking the opportunity to present to us very, very clearly, and many of you actually accept that he's made an excellent discussion, an excellent presentation. I agree with you as well. And Eric Musau specifically, let me summarize his words: excellent discussion. Thank you, IEA and CAM, for raising such a topical and important issue, as you always do. Great speaker for the topic. So Mushai, kudos to you. And for everybody else, thanks for being here. We have sent in the link copies of the manufacturing manifesto. Please find both the abridged version and the main document itself. They make for good reading, and will prepare us for all the claims you're going to hear from different political configurations about how to make Kenya a better country. And so on behalf of the members of the IEA staff and the Kenya Association of Manufacturers, I'd like to thank Mushai for being here with us today. Thanks a lot. And everybody else, you have a good morning, and hope to see you again. Thank you. So we can give Mushai, all of us can give Mushai a wave. Yep. And thanks, guys. Have a good morning. Yes. Thank you.